Welcome back to coding section. In this video, we'll build one major part of every game you see, and that is the controls. First, we'll use pre-built joystick controls, and further into the video, we'll go ahead and build our own custom buttons. I hope you're excited to dive into our game today, and if you are, you can just click the subscribe button. If we're learning about buttons, it will be nice to start with that one. But anyways, I'm glad to have you here, and let's start building games. Beginning from the last video, I'll create a joystick component called controls. The joystick requires a knob and a background. I would use circle component for this, but you can actually use any component, even sprites. It is currently placed as the top left, so let's move it to a position where it is more visible. I will adjust the color of the knob so we can see it clearly. And frankly, this is all you need to create a joystick. If you want to listen to updates from the joystick, you can just check for the direction variable in the joystick component, and this direction is an enum telling you which position the joystick is facing at that time. We can use this for our game, but I want to use something more custom built, so you can see how you can create a button for any purpose. Let's create a folder called components. This is where all our Flame components would live. Within it, I'll add the movement control component. It would be our button for controlling movement, and it extends the position component. Let me add this to the game so that we can see our changes as we build the app. Going back to our control components, I will create a button component and add it to the screen. The button component has 3 event handlers, and they are onPressed, onReleased, and onCancelled. When the onPressed is called when the button is pressed, and onReleased when the button is released. But onCancelled is quite different. It is called when the user doesn't release the button but slides out of the button component. This usually happens when the user is still pressing the button but slides away. We'll test this out once we design these buttons. Going on, the body of the button requires one component, and for now I'll place a rectangle component. Let's give it a white color so it is visible. Now we have a rectangle button. Another important property of the button is the children property. This allows us to add more components to the button. I will use this to add a text component. You can add styles to the text using a text paint, and then you can use the normal Flutter text style to style the text as much as you want. Our current button rectangle is covering the text, so I will change the default fill to a stroke, which only paints on the sides. Let's center the text. Since the overall size is 50, the half point should be 25. The text is now looking fine. I'll just extract this into a method called the button with the text parameter. We will need 3 more buttons for motion controls. Since we would have more than one button on this component, I will override the size of the control component to a size that would fit our buttons when we align all of them. Now, I'll use the position variable to place each of them as they should appear on the screen. This gives us a nice control that holds 4 buttons. Let's take a look at how the event handlers work. I'll add print methods to the onPressed, onReleased, and onCancelled so that we can see how they handle events. If I click on the button and release it, the onPressed and onReleased is called. You can see it on the logs. But if I hold the button and then slide out of the region while still holding the button, the onCancelled is called when I slide out of the button. Right now, we have our sprites and we also have our controller. It is time to create a component that holds all the details about the player we want to control. I'll create a component called the PlayerCharacter. From now on, this is the component we would use to manage a player in our game. The PlayerCharacter would need a character type so that we know the character that the player chose. Within this component, we'll have the state. This is used to set the action the player is performing. The initial state is set to idle. I will also set the sprite animation. I will use a late keyword because it would have to be set after the component is created using the specified player type, and also this would not be a null value. Inside the onload function, we can set the sprite animation component using the getPlayerAnimation function we created in the previous video. We can go back to the fighting game and clean up all previous codes. Let's use a function called loadAllImages to load all our images for now. This function loads all images added to the game. With this function, there is no need to load them individually, but it comes at a cost because you might end up loading some of the images you won't need, and this is not very efficient. Because this game has few assets and it is mainly for learning purposes, I'll keep it as it is. For each game, we would have a player, the enemy, and a background. So we'll add these parameters to the game class. Going back to the main function, we add these values. Let's go back to the game and place all of them. I'll set the orientation to landscape mode. And I'll also set the flame device settings to full screen and landscape. This is so that the flame game always covers the whole screen for all devices. Back to the fighting game. Let's set the ground level for the players. I'll use 50 units above the bottom of the screen. The players don't look nice. Let's go into the player character and anchor them to the bottom. Now their bottom is at the ground position. The two players are currently facing one direction, and that is not okay. Let's create a direction enum to store the player's direction. I will add this to the player character class. Within the onload function, we'll check if the player is set to face left and then flip the sprites horizontally. Let's add the enum values to the players. The next step is to add the controls we created earlier. I will use the size of the screen and the size of the controls which we added to the widgets to fix it at the right side. I feel the control will look better if we use sprites, so I found a pack with button sprites on CraftPix. The link is in the description, and if you got the starter file, you already have this under the buttons folder. I will just pick the sprites I need and add them to the assets. In the button component, we can replace the text with a sprite. Let me add some more variables to this button function. We would need some functions to handle the events on this button, like move left, move right, jump, and sprint. Let's place the images with their appropriate sprites. And I'm getting an error. I forgot to load the buttons in the pubspec.yaml file. And now it works. Let me just rearrange the buttons and then resize the sprites. The white color is getting lost in the background, so let's use some black borders and a transparent dark background. I will duplicate this for the control on the other side of the screen. And then I'll place this on the right. Let me change the alignment of the buttons. These buttons also perform different actions, so I'll change the functions too. Let's give them a circular shape because I think the circle looks better. The second control seems lower than the first, so I'll move it up a little bit. And this is our controls in our game. The game is beginning to look more like the finished product. And that is it for today. I hope to see you in the next one. Have a nice day.